Lila, a young woman, firmly believes that true love should not be confined by traditional rules. For her, freedom is the essence of a healthy relationship, where two individuals can grow and explore the world without the fear of losing each other. After entering a relationship with James, a man who is calm yet filled with doubt, Lila pushes him to embrace an open relationship, convinced that it will bring them closer. However, as time passes, Lila begins to sense an inevitable tension. The freedom she longed for begins to drive a wedge between her and James. As their closeness starts to fracture and guilt haunts her, Lila must decide whether to continue fighting for the freedom she seeks or accept the reality that love sometimes requires more than just freedom. This journey teaches Lila that in order to find true happiness, one must first discover peace within oneself, even if it means letting go of a relationship that once seemed perfect. Lila had always believed that true love should be unrestrained, free from the conventional boundaries that society often placed upon it. Since her adolescence, she had felt uneasy within relationships filled with rules and constraints. In her eyes, love should not be confined by words like ownership or commitment. Instead, it should flow like the wind, free and untamed, with nothing to hold it back. To Lila, freedom was the key to finding true love, and she had made this belief the cornerstone of her existence. When Lila first met James, something in her stirred. He was a man of calm, yet there was something in his eyes that made her want to bare her soul to him. With his short black hair and perpetually serene expression, James was unlike any man she had ever encountered. Yet, there was something about him that drew her in, urging her to dig deeper. "I want to know what you think about love," Lila said one day, as they sat together in a small café in Prenzlauer Berg, a vibrant district in Berlin known for its lively nightlife and ever-changing atmosphere. "Why do you ask?" James fixed his piercing blue eyes on her, as though trying to peer into the depths of her thoughts. Lila smiled, her voice almost testing, like an unspoken challenge. "I feel that love shouldn't be restricted to just one person. What if we could love more than one person, without feeling guilty or confined?" James fell silent for a moment, his gaze deepening as if weighing her words. Lila felt the tension in the air, the moment hanging on the edge of a precipice, waiting for his response. James was not one to rush his answers. He preferred to observe, to reflect, and to think carefully before offering his thoughts. "Do you really think so?" James finally asked. "I know we often hear about freedom in love, but I wonder, can it last? Can we truly enjoy love without limits?" Lila felt the weight of his words. There was doubt in James's voice that she couldn't ignore, yet she felt certain in her own choice. "I'm sure of it, James. Love is more than just a relationship between two people. It's about trust, about openness. And I believe that if we give each other freedom, our love can grow in ways we've never imagined before." James exhaled slowly, his expression softening as he looked at her. "Perhaps you're right," he murmured. "I'm just afraid of losing the closeness we have. I don't want this freedom to pull us apart." Lila gently took his hand in hers. "No, James. It's not about losing anything. It's about expanding what's already here, without fear. We can grow together, without limitations. That's what I dream of in our relationship." Her words seemed to anchor him, but the uncertainty remained. James found himself torn between his deep love for Lila and the growing doubts about the freedom she sought to embrace. Yet, for the first time in his life, he wondered, perhaps, just perhaps, this freedom could lead them to a deeper connection. "I'll give it a try," James said softly, almost in disbelief at his own words. Lila's smile was one of quiet victory. She felt as though she had just opened a door to an infinite world, a world where love wasn't just about two people claiming each other, but about two souls growing together without barriers. She felt a sense of relief though in the depths of her heart, there was something unspoken, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, this decision was not as simple as it seemed, despite her desire to believe in it. 5 days later. The days following their agreement to try an open relationship felt like a transformation for Lila. Each morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of hope. The world now seemed to stretch out before her, boundless and full of possibilities. She started her days lighter, unburdened, no longer afraid. Every time they met, she shared stories about new people she met, new experiences she embraced, and how she felt freer than ever before. Lila felt stronger in her decision, confident that this was the best way to find true love. But on the other hand, James couldn't shake the unease that lingered beneath the surface. Though he had agreed to try, there was a tension he couldn't avoid. Every time Lila spoke about meeting someone new, he felt a pang of discomfort. He smiled, but there was a growing distance between them. The love he once felt for Lila seemed to change, not drawing them closer but pushing them apart. One evening, after Lila returned from meeting a new friend, James sat on the sofa, staring at his phone screen without blinking. Lila entered the living room, hung her jacket on the rack, and noticed James still sitting there, his piercing blue eyes fixed on something far beyond the screen. "You haven't said a word all day," Lila said, trying to break the silence. James turned to her with a faint smile. "I've just been thinking, Lila. About what you said, about this relationship." Lila sat beside him, sensing the tension in the air. "What do you mean?" James shook his head. "I just feel a bit confused. I know this is our decision, but I can't help but feel like I'm losing something. Something more important than freedom." Lila looked at him, her expression growing serious. "What do you mean?" she asked again, this time with a note of concern in her voice. James took a deep breath. "I feel like, even though we're free to explore other relationships, I'm losing something more precious. Our closeness, Lila. That's what I miss." Lila fell silent. Suddenly, all the words she had said about freedom felt insufficient. She began to sense that perhaps freedom came with a price far higher than she had anticipated. The next morning, Lila woke with a swirl of emotions. Despite the unease she had felt after her conversation with James the night before, there was an unmistakable sense of anticipation within her. She knew this was the path she had chosen, and now she was eager to see how far the freedom she so passionately believed in would take her. In Berlin, a city filled with freedom and opportunity, Lila felt as if her life had taken on new, vibrant colors. Every day, every new experience, offered a sensation that was difficult to explain. After breakfast in the apartment they shared, Lila stepped out with enthusiasm. She wore a flowing ethnic pattern dress that made her feel light and free. Her distinctive style made her stand out amid the bustling streets of Berlin, a city brimming with people each in pursuit of their own freedom. Lila decided to visit a local art event in Mitte, an area renowned for its creative energy and the diverse communities that valued each other's differences. There, she met Luca, an Italian artist searching for inspiration for his work. They spent hours discussing art, freedom, and how art could bring people together across various divides. Lila was captivated, not only by his personality but also by Luca's perspective on the world. They shared a cup of coffee at a quaint cafe tucked away on a quiet street corner, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Yet, despite feeling a deep connection with Luca, a strange feeling crept into Lila's heart. When she told him about her open relationship with James, she hesitated slightly. "I've just started an open relationship with my partner," she said, offering a half-smile, trying to convince herself more than Luca. "I feel free to explore, to seek out new experiences." Luca smiled warmly and nodded. "That sounds wonderful," he replied. "I've always believed that freedom is the key to love and life. There's nothing more beautiful than being yourself without fear of judgment." Lila felt reassured by Luca's words. She felt that she was on the right path, that the freedom she had fought for was something to be valued. But when Luca suggested meeting again, there was something that nagged at her, a thought of James. Though the open relationship gave Lila the freedom to explore, her heart was still tethered to James, even though she wasn't ready to admit it. 2 days later. As Lila continued to enjoy her days in Berlin, James grew increasingly anxious. Despite agreeing to give Lila the freedom she desired, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting between them. Each time Lila spoke about the new people she was meeting, James felt a growing sense of alienation. He found himself distancing from her, and though he tried to ignore it, he couldn't deny the change. One evening, after Lila returned from another art event, James invited her to sit with him. "Lila," he said, his tone serious, "we need to talk." Lila, who had just entered the apartment, raised an eyebrow and looked at James with concern. "What's wrong?" "I'm not sure," James answered softly. "I just feel like something's missing. Every time you tell me about someone new you've met, I feel like I'm growing further away from you. I feel like we're losing the closeness we had." Lila fell silent for a moment. She knew this was the conversation she had been trying to avoid. She had been convincing herself that the open relationship would take them to a better place, but now, she felt uncertain. Would this freedom truly lead to the happiness they sought, or was it slowly unraveling everything they had built together? I don't know what to say, James, Lila responded softly. I feel happy with this freedom, but I don't want to lose you. James looked at her with a serious gaze. I feel neglected, Lila. I know you want freedom, but I also want to feel connected to you. Lila felt a tightness in her chest. She wanted to reassure James that this freedom would not ruin their bond, but the words felt empty. What did they really want from this relationship? Freedom or closeness? Lila was torn, and deep down, she felt as though she had to choose between two things that were deeply important to her, love and freedom. 3 days later, Lila decided to take some time to reflect. She felt caught between two difficult choices. On one hand, she wanted to continue exploring the freedom she had chosen, but on the other, she knew that her relationship with James might be on the verge of crumbling. She took a trip to Lake Toba, a place far from the hustle and bustle of the city. There, she felt a sense of peace, far from the chaos of Berlin and the freedom she had embraced. The cool breeze brushed against her face as she sat at the edge of the lake, gazing at the tranquil water. She began to think deeply about what she truly wanted from life. For a while, she sat in silence, allowing her feelings to come and go. All that could be heard was the wind and the gentle rippling of the water, accompanying her wandering thoughts. Lila knew that the decision she made would affect her future, and James's. But was she ready to face the consequences? She took a deep breath, trying to absorb all the emotions she was experiencing. Freedom, love, and closeness all seemed to be in conflict within her heart. Lila knew that, at that moment, she had to make a very difficult choice, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Lila returned to Berlin after a few days at Lake Toba, but her heart felt heavier than before. There, amidst the peacefulness of nature, she had found a fleeting sense of calm, but as soon as she returned to the hustle and bustle of the city, the unease crept back into her thoughts. She felt caught between two worlds, the world of freedom she longed for and the world of a relationship that was beginning to crack. That evening, as she walked home after meeting some new friends, she saw James sitting on the sofa as usual, phone in hand. When he saw Lila enter, he set down his phone and looked at her with an expression full of hope. Yet, there was something in his gaze that made Lila shiver, something that told her she could no longer avoid the conversation that had been long overdue. James, what's going on? Lila asked quietly, realizing that the atmosphere had shifted. James took a deep breath, beginning the sentence he had kept inside for so long. Lila, I don't know how much longer I can continue like this. I feel like I'm losing myself. Every time you talk about the people you're meeting, I feel like I'm no longer a part of your life. I feel neglected. Lila felt as though the world had stopped spinning. A rush of guilt hit her hard. She knew that the freedom she sought came with consequences. But she also felt trapped. On one hand, she wanted James to understand that this was a choice that made her feel alive, that she wanted to explore further without constraints. On the other hand, she knew their relationship was being tested. James continued, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel anymore, Lila. I thought this would strengthen our relationship, but now I feel more distant from you. I don't know if I can still love someone who's constantly chasing freedom like this. Lila tried to steady her breath. She knew this was the conversation she had been avoiding, but hearing his words felt like a sharp blow. I don't want you to feel that way, James. I just want us to grow together, not be confined by rules that limit us. It's not about avoiding commitment, it's about how we can share love with more than one person without losing each other. James looked at her with a face full of disappointment. Lila, we've already committed to each other. Can you really forget that commitment just for freedom? I can't see us continuing down this path if we keep feeling neglected. Lila felt as though those words were a hard slap. All this time, she had focused on the freedom she envisioned, but now she realized that perhaps that freedom was too much for two people who loved each other to bear. She felt confused, torn between the freedom she had chosen and the relationship she had shared with James for so long. I don't know what to say, James, Lila said, her voice trembling. I feel happy with this freedom, but I also want you to be happy. I don't want us to keep hurting each other. James stood up and walked to the window. I just want us to go back to a simpler time. When we could love each other without the fear of losing one another. I want what we had to be whole again, Lila. Lila looked at James's stiff back, feeling herself split between her desire to continue exploring this free world and her longing to preserve the love they had built. 2 days later. After the heavy conversation, Lila felt increasingly pressured. She felt trapped between two choices that seemed irreconcilable. Though she tried to calm herself by attending some art events and meeting new friends, her heart remained unsettled. Her mind kept returning to James, to the conversation that was far from over, and she felt herself drifting further from peace. One evening, after returning from a cafe where she had met Luca, Lila found herself reflecting on her balcony. The cool evening air of Berlin offered her a fleeting sense of calm, but in her heart, she felt a storm of emotions she couldn't quite quell. She began to realize that the freedom she so enjoyed might have come at the cost of more important things in her life. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. Lila looked at the screen and saw James's name appear. She hesitated for a moment but finally decided to pick up. James. Lila's voice sounded soft and anxious. "It's me," James replied, his tone calmer than before. "Lila, I think we need to talk again." Lila took a deep breath. "I feel the same," she answered quietly. That night, they met again at the same cafe in Kreuzberg, a place they had always frequented. The atmosphere that night felt different. There was no laughter or teasing as there usually was. Only a heavy conversation that they could no longer avoid. James sat with a gentler expression this time. "I'm sorry if I rushed things, Lila. I didn't want you to feel pressured. I just feel like I'm losing us, and that's really painful." Lila nodded, her eyes full of regret as she looked at him. "I feel lost too, James. I think we need to reconsider what we want from this relationship. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to force something that maybe we can't live with together." James sighed, his blue eyes tired. "I think we need to find a middle ground, Lila. Maybe we can find a way to love each other without having to sacrifice ourselves." Lila felt a sense of relief listening to him. She knew this wasn't the end of everything, but perhaps it was the beginning of something new, a deeper understanding between them. There was no love without limits, and no freedom without responsibility. But maybe together, they could find a way to love each other without losing themselves. After their intense meeting at the Kreuzberg Café, Lila felt a slight sense of calm, though she was still weighed down by countless questions. That night, as she lay in bed back at their apartment, staring at the ceiling, she felt a heavy emptiness in her chest. She knew that their conversation was far from over. This was just the beginning of something bigger and far more complicated. The following days passed slowly. James and Lila still talked, but there was a tension between them. Despite their efforts to continue as usual, the discomfort lingered, lurking in every corner of their conversations. James focused more on his work, often spending time outside the apartment to avoid further discussions. Lila tried to keep herself busy with various activities, but each time she saw James sitting in silence, the weight on her heart grew heavier. One afternoon, Lila decided to visit an art exhibition she had long wanted to see. She hoped that it might bring her some inspiration or perhaps a bit of peace. As she wandered among the captivating paintings, she felt something stir inside her. One painting in particular caught her attention. It was a portrait of a woman standing at the edge of the sea, facing the rolling waves, her expression full of confusion, as though standing at a crossroads. Lila paused, staring at the painting, and felt an intense connection. The woman in the painting seemed trapped between two worlds. On one side, she wanted to leave, but on the other, she wanted to stay. Lila sighed deeply. This was the perfect representation of herself. She felt as if she was at a crossroads, torn between the freedom she yearned for and the relationship that was now beginning to feel fragile. She knew that a big decision needed to be made, but she was afraid that if she took the wrong step, everything would be lost. Back at the apartment. When Lila returned home, she found James sitting in the living room, staring at his phone. He seemed undisturbed by her arrival, as if they had both become accustomed to the distance that had formed between them. The sadness in Lila's chest only grew tighter. What were they fighting for if they could no longer communicate openly? Gathering her courage, Lila spoke up. "James, we need to talk about this. I know we haven't finished our last conversation." James looked up, and this time, his eyes seemed more open. "I know, Lila. I think I think we need to find a middle ground. Maybe we can figure out a way for both of us to be happy. Lila sat beside him. I want that, James. I want us to go back to how we were. I don't want to lose you. James nodded slowly. But I also don't want us to lose ourselves. I want us to be able to love each other in a healthy way, in a way we can both live with without feeling forced. That conversation marked a pivotal moment for them. Both wanted to stay together, but they also realized that freedom and closeness had to go hand in hand. But which path should they choose? Could they find a way to love each other without losing what they had fought for? A few days later, Lila decided to leave the city again, this time to a more distant place where she could reflect. She chose to visit a small village outside Berlin, far from the crowds. With casual clothes and a backpack, Lila set off with the intention of finding peace. In the village, Lila felt like she had returned to a simpler world, where each step felt lighter. She spent her time wandering through vast fields, chatting with the friendly locals, and enjoying the quiet peace she hadn't felt in the city. Lila felt like she was reconnecting with herself, away from all the noise that had been weighing on her mind. One afternoon, Lila sat on a small park bench, enjoying the view of the sun setting behind the hills. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from James. Lila, I think I know what we should do. I want us to start with small steps. We can begin by listening to each other again, without pressure, without rules. Lila smiled as she read the message. Perhaps this was the beginning of something better. Maybe freedom didn't have to mean separation, but rather giving each other space to grow, without the fear of losing one another. Back in Berlin. Upon returning to Berlin, Lila felt a new sense of lightness. While she was still uncertain, she also felt more at ease. She realized that their decision to continue their relationship wasn't about fighting for limitless freedom, but about finding a healthy balance between two people who loved each other. That night, she and James met again at the same Kreuzberg cafe. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. There was no tension, just a conversation that was lighter, filled with hope. They talked about their future, not about freedom or rules, but about how they could support each other and become better together. I think we can try, Lila, James said, a smile on his face. Love isn't about having no boundaries, but about trusting each other and giving space. Lila nodded, feeling relieved. I'm ready, James. I want us to walk together, in our own way, but supporting each other. That night, they went home feeling lighter. Lila knew that their relationship still had many challenges ahead, but now she felt that they could face them together, with open hearts and the belief that their love could grow, even if it looked different from what they had originally imagined. Lila felt lighter after their conversation that night, but there was one thing that continued to nag at her thoughts. Would their decision really make their relationship better? Although James and Lila had agreed to try and find a more balanced way of being together, Lila couldn't shake off the doubt that lingered inside her. What if they were simply going in circles, trying to find a middle ground that didn't really exist? That morning, Lila sat on the balcony of their apartment, sipping a warm cup of tea while gazing at the busy city of Berlin. A sense of calm enveloped her, yet deep inside, a lingering feeling of anxiety was impossible to ignore. Since returning from the village a few days ago, she felt like there was a shift within her. However, it felt more like pieces of a puzzle that hadn't quite come together. There were still so many unanswered questions, and now, Lila had to face the reality that a big step needed to be taken. Their lives had been filled with so many conversations about freedom, love, and sacrifice. But now Lila knew that, although freedom could bring happiness, it would never be complete without mutual respect, without true closeness. And that closeness, she realized, required more than just space to grow, it demanded sincere commitment. 2 days later, James invited Lila to meet at a park in Tiergarten, a vast park in the heart of Berlin, full of lush trees and quiet pathways. Lila felt uneasy, even though they had already committed to trying to find balance. There was something in the way James had sent the message that made her feel this conversation would lead to something much bigger. They sat on a bench overlooking a small lake, breathing in the fresh air that filled their lungs. There, far from the city's hustle, they felt more at peace, but the feelings inside their hearts were still unavoidable. James looked at Lila, and this time, his eyes were no longer full of confusion. There was a resolve in his gaze that made Lila feel increasingly anxious. Lila, James began, his voice soft yet full of meaning. I want us to talk more deeply about what we really want. I know we've been trying to find a middle ground, but I feel like there's something we haven't addressed yet. I think we need more than just trying. We need a clear commitment, not just about freedom or rules, but about how we want to live our lives together. Lila looked at James with a serious expression. Her heart raced. This was a moment that demanded a big decision. I know, she answered softly. I feel like we've been searching for something, but we don't really know what it is. I want us to feel safe with each other, but also remain free. Maybe I've focused too much on freedom and forgotten about how we can trust each other. James nodded, as though understanding what was on Lila's mind. I want us to find that closeness again, Lila. Freedom is important, but I don't want it to mean that we become two people separated from each other. Lila felt a warmth rise in her heart. James had finally expressed what he had been feeling all along. Though they had tried living an open relationship, which Lila thought would bring happiness, she realized that true happiness was found in a deeper commitment, not in boundless freedom. James, Lila said, looking at him with full conviction, I want to commit to us. I want us to remain us, even if it's in a way different from what we had imagined before. I don't want to stay trapped between freedom and closeness. I want us to walk together. James smiled, a smile that was sincere and full of hope. I want that too, Lila. I want us to be a team, not two people fighting alone. A few days later, life for Lila and James felt lighter now. They started to restructure their relationship, with a stronger commitment to listening to each other and giving each other space. Lila decided to explore freedom in a wiser way, and James tried to be more open to the changes happening in their relationship. They chose to live a simpler life, but with a deeper sense of trust. After several weeks, Lila felt that their relationship had passed a significant test. Though there were still challenges ahead, she felt closer to James than ever before. They spent time together, not just as partners but as friends who supported each other. Every night, they sat together, talking about their day, laughing, and planning their future. That night at Lake Toba, Lila returned to the place that once gave her peace, Lake Toba. This time, she was not alone. James was with her. They sat together by the lake, enjoying the tranquility that could only be found in a place far from the chaos of the world. I feel more at peace now, Lila said, gazing at the shimmering lake beneath the moonlight. Maybe I don't need to search for unlimited freedom. Maybe true freedom is about giving each other space to grow. James took Lila's hand, holding it gently. I feel the same way. We've been through so much together, and I believe we can live a better, simpler life, supporting each other. Lila smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt like the burden on her heart had been lifted. They were no longer trapped between freedom or rigid commitment, but had found a way to love each other in a healthier, more balanced way. She knew this was the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. After several weeks of living a more peaceful and understanding life, Lila and James felt their relationship growing more stable. They began to find the balance they had been seeking, not caught between limitless freedom or strict commitment, but in a space that allowed them to grow together without losing each other. However, even though peace seemed more real, there was one thing that kept lingering in Lila's heart. Could they truly maintain this balance? Was their relationship strong enough to withstand greater challenges? That evening, Lila and James returned to the Kreuzberg Café, which had once witnessed their significant conversation about an open relationship. This café, with its warm and familiar atmosphere, now felt even more meaningful to them. There, amidst the bustling conversations of other patrons, they sat together, ordered warm coffee, and leaned into the comfort they had found in one another. I feel like we're much better now, Lila said with a soft smile. It feels like we truly understand each other. James nodded. I feel the same. We've been through a lot, and I think we're starting to know what we really want from this relationship. Lila looked at him, feeling warmth in her heart. But, James, I still feel like there are many things we haven't talked about. We agreed to try a middle path, but is that enough? Can we truly stay on this path? James looked at Lila seriously, as if weighing his words. Lila, I don't know the exact answer. We've tried, and I feel like we've been more open with each other. But I think we need to keep talking, keep learning from what we're experiencing. Lila squeezed James's hand, feeling the depth of love in it. I want us to keep fighting, James. I want us to keep growing together. But I also don't want us to get trapped in something that makes us lose ourselves. James smiled and returned her hand squeeze. I want that too, Lila. We need to keep maintaining this balance, and always communicate. If we can do that, I believe we'll be fine. The conversation felt lighter than before, and for the first time in a while, Lila felt sure that they were heading in the right direction. But she also knew that this journey wouldn't always be easy. There were many things they would have to face, and although their relationship was growing stronger, they couldn't avoid the reality that bigger challenges would come. 3 days later. Life seemed to be finding its balance. Lila was experiencing the peace she had once lost, and James had started to feel more open and comfortable. They spent time doing activities together, enjoying days without pressure. Although sometimes they felt a little confined by routine, there was contentment in the togetherness they felt. One night, after a long day of work, Lila and James decided to take a walk along the East Side Gallery, one of the largest mural galleries in the world, located along the former Berlin Wall. The wall was not only a symbol of history, but also a reminder of how much change could happen. They walked side by side, strolling along the path filled with colorful murals depicting messages of peace and freedom. Lila rested her head on James's shoulder, feeling safe and comfortable with him. I love this place, she said softly. It reminds me of how powerful change can be. How something once seen as a barrier can now be a symbol of freedom and recovery. James gazed at the murals they were passing. I think our relationship is like that too, Lila. We've gone through many tough things, but it's those very things that have made us stronger now. We're no longer trapped behind a wall, we're starting to build something new. Lila felt her heart filled with warmth and hope. We can do this, James. I believe we can get through all of this. James smiled and pulled her closer, embracing her gently. I believe that too, Lila. We can face anything together. A few days later, Lila decided to visit that special place once again, Lake Toba. This time, she wasn't alone. James came with her. Together, they found the same peace in the place that had always given them the space to reflect and rediscover their purpose. On the calm shore of the lake, with the sun slowly setting behind the hills, they sat together, enjoying the quiet that could only be found in a place like this. I feel like I've come back to the right place, Lila said in a soft voice. I feel like we've found our way, James. James nodded and looked at her with loving eyes. I feel the same. Maybe it's time for us to stop searching and start appreciating what we have. Lila smiled, feeling a deeper sense of peace. We don't need to keep searching, because we have each other. They sat together by the lake, enjoying the simple but meaningful moment of togetherness. Lila knew that although there were still many things to face, they now had a stronger foundation to move forward. They had learned to listen to each other, give each other space, and most importantly, they had found a way to grow together without losing themselves. The days passed more peacefully after their trip to Lake Toba. Lila and James felt the growing closeness between them, though both knew that life was never completely free from trials. They had been through so much together, fighting to keep their relationship alive amidst the freedom they had chosen. However, as time went on, Lila began to feel something unsettling in her heart. One quiet night, while they were sitting in the living room, Lila felt as though something was missing. There was an odd feeling gnawing at her mind, a feeling that, although their relationship was becoming more stable, there was a gap that she could not deny. Maybe they had found the balance between freedom and commitment, but for some reason, she felt further away from James. James, Lila began, her voice tentative. I think we need to talk again. James, who was reading a book, looked up at her with a gentle gaze. About what, Lila? Lila felt the weight of the burden growing heavier. About us. About our feelings. I feel like we're getting closer, but there's something in my heart that feels neglected. James put down his book and looked at her with a look of deep concern. What do you mean, Lila? I feel like we're in a good place now. Lila bit her lip, trying to find the right words. I feel like we're starting to lose the things we once had. Our intimacy. Not just physically, but emotionally. I feel like we're just going through the motions, trying to keep balance, but there's an emptiness I can't ignore. James sighed deeply. I feel it too, Lila. I feel like something is missing, but I don't know what it is. Maybe we've been too focused on our rules, too busy talking about freedom and commitment that we've forgotten how to truly be there for each other. Lila's heart ached hearing those words. She knew they both wanted the same thing, to stay together and support each other, but she felt an inevitable distance growing between them. "I'm afraid we're starting to lose ourselves in this process, James. We're trying too hard to keep everything balanced, but we're not giving space for ourselves." James paused for a moment, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "Maybe you're right," he said finally. "Maybe we've been too focused on what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to act, that we've forgotten how we feel for each other." Lila felt her eyes begin to fill with tears. She tried to hold them back, but the emotions were becoming harder to control. "I feel like we're getting stuck in a routine, James. I don't know if we can still feel the little things that made us fall in love with each other." James stood up from his chair and walked toward Lila. "I don't want to lose us, Lila. I feel like something is missing too, but I don't know how to bring it back." Lila looked at James, her heart full of emotion. "We need to find a way, James. We can't keep going like this. We have to start really listening to each other, without the fear of being tied down or separated." James nodded, taking Lila's hand in his. "We need to be more honest, more open. I'm ready to try, Lila." 3 days later, Lila and James returned to the place that had once witnessed the beginning of their relationship, a small park they had stumbled upon the first time they walked together in Berlin. They sat on the same bench, under the same tree, with the same breeze bringing peace. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. There was no tension lingering, but there was a sense of emptiness that was hard to explain. "Maybe we've been fighting too long for the right answer," Lila said, her voice softer and full of sadness. "We need to learn to let go of the things we thought had to be in this relationship, and focus on the things that truly matter." James looked at her with a deep understanding in his eyes. "I know, Lila. I feel the same. We've been too caught up in what should be, but we've forgotten to feel what's between us." Lila squeezed James's hand tighter. "I think we need to learn to enjoy the small moments more. To feel each other without fear." James nodded, his eyes brightening. "I'm ready, Lila. We'll start from here. We don't need to chase anything other than this togetherness." They sat in silence, soaking in the moment, where they no longer felt trapped by expectations or fears. They knew this journey was still long, but for the first time in a long time, they felt confident that they could face it together. A few weeks later, Lila and James continued their life, with a new awareness of the importance of honesty and openness in their relationship. They began spending more time together, without feeling burdened by expectations. They stopped comparing themselves to what they thought an ideal relationship should be, and started enjoying their time together as it was. Lila felt like she had found herself again. She was no longer trapped in the search for boundless freedom that she once thought was essential. She realized that true freedom wasn't about chasing everything outside, but about finding peace within herself and with the person she loved. James felt the same way. Although they still had challenges to face, they were now stronger than before. They knew that love wasn't just about freedom or rigid commitment, but about mutual respect and giving space to grow together. Although Lila and James had made great strides in repairing their relationship, an inevitable tension still lingered, hidden between their words. They had been living a more relaxed and understanding life in the past few weeks, but something still hung in the air, the fear of losing each other and the uncertainty that continued to emerge in every corner of their relationship. One night, after a dinner spent discussing their future, Lila felt something different in James. He was quieter, spent more time staring at his phone, and seemed distant from the conversation they were having. Lila felt that the feeling was growing stronger, and although she tried to ignore it, she knew that tonight was the night they needed to discuss something significant. "Lila," James started, his voice soft yet filled with silence. "I want us to talk about something I've been holding in for a long time. I think it's important, and I can't keep hiding it." Lila looked at James with concern, her heart racing faster. "About what, James?" she asked, trying to read his expression, which seemed filled with emotions she couldn't fully understand. James took a deep breath. "I feel like we've reached the end of the road, Lila. I'm starting to feel that even though we're trying to listen and understand each other, there's something we can't fix. There's a part of us that's growing further apart, and I don't know if we can go back to how we used to be." Lila was shocked to hear those words. Although she had felt the growing tension, she never imagined James would express such feelings. "What do you mean?" Her voice quivered. "We've tried so hard to fix this relationship. I feel like we've gotten better, James. We're starting to enjoy moments together again." James lowered his gaze, his eyes filled with sadness. "I know, Lila. I feel like we've tried too. But the longer this goes on, the more I feel isolated. I feel like we've lost the closeness we once had. We've talked too much about freedom and commitment, but we've forgotten how to truly feel each other, how to pay attention to what we have now." Lila felt her heart shatter hearing those words. She knew they both wanted the same thing, to stay together and support each other, but now, she felt like everything was falling apart again. "James, I don't know what to say," her voice cracked. "I want us to be together. I want us to fight together, but I don't know how we can overcome all this." James raised his head, his eyes weary. "I want that too, Lila. But we can't keep living in confusion. We need to be honest with ourselves about what we want from this relationship. I feel like we've grown further away from ourselves. Maybe it's time for us to stop and find a different path." Lila felt as if the whole world had stopped spinning around her. James's words hit her like a slap, and for the first time, she felt truly lost. "So you want us to break up?" she asked in a barely audible voice, her eyes searching for an answer in James's gaze. James lowered his head, as if he could no longer hold back the feelings. "I don't want to break up, Lila. I want us to stay together, but I feel like we've drifted too far apart, too many things we haven't solved. Maybe we need time to reflect and find ourselves again, without any pressure." Lila felt as though the world around her was crumbling. Even though she knew there was truth in James's words, her heart refused to accept that reality. She felt lonely, trapped in her own confusion. On one hand, she knew they both needed time to reflect, but on the other, she feared this was the end of their journey together. 2 days later, Lila spent the next few days alone, trying to process James's words and the feelings raging inside her. Those days felt longer than usual, and although she tried to keep busy with work and other activities, the feeling of loss was inescapable. Lila felt as if she were trapped in an empty space, torn between the love she wanted to hold on to and the reality that their relationship might no longer be fixable. One morning, after days of reflection, Lila decided to visit the place that always brought her peace, Lake Toba, a place that had always been her refuge when faced with uncertainty. This time, James didn't join her, as they had agreed to give each other some space. Lila felt that perhaps, only by reflecting alone, could she find the answer she was seeking. By the lakeshore, Lila sat alone, staring at the calm and clear water. The gentle breeze touched her skin, and she allowed herself to sink into the tranquility of the place. Yet, despite the peaceful surroundings, her heart still felt restless. She missed the closeness they once shared, when their relationship was full of promises and hope. Lila took a deep breath, trying to push away her worries. "What do I really want?" she asked herself. "What do we need to feel that closeness again?" As she watched the sun slowly set behind the hills, Lila felt as though she had to make a big decision. Perhaps, for the first time in her life, she had to truly let go of something in order to find peace within herself. But was she ready for that? Was she ready to accept that love didn't always mean holding on to the relationship, but about allowing herself to grow, even if it meant letting go of someone she deeply loved? After a few days at Lake Toba, Lila returned to Berlin with a calmer heart, although her mind was still filled with unanswered questions. The time she spent by the lake gave her the opportunity to reflect, but it also made her realize that this journey couldn't go on forever. She felt increasingly confused, torn between her desire to maintain her relationship with James and the reality that she might have to let go of it to find peace within herself. That night, after returning to her apartment, Lila sat in the living room, staring at her silent phone. She didn't know where to start this conversation, but she knew she had to meet with James, to face him honestly, to provide clarity. Their relationship could no longer continue like this without a decision being made. They had fought for so long, but Lila felt that this was the point where they needed to take a more definite step. Lila looked at the photos of them together on the small table beside her bed. They looked happy in every photo, smiling brightly, supporting each other in everything. However, those photos seemed to only remind Lila of what had been lost. Once, they were inseparable. But now, that feeling seemed to be slowly fading away. With a heavy heart, Lila sent James a message, asking to meet. There were no more sweet words in the message, just a simple request: "James, we need to talk." The next day, James arrived at Lila's apartment sooner than she had expected. The look in his eyes was sharper than usual, signaling that he had already prepared himself for this conversation. Lila stood to greet him at the door, and there was a moment of silence before they began speaking. James nodded and sat on the sofa, waiting for Lila to start. Lila sat in the chair across from him, gripping her hands tightly, trying to calm herself. "James, I feel like we've reached a point now. We've tried to find the middle ground, but I feel like I'm growing further away from you." James looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "I know, Lila. I feel it too. I feel like we're not connected like we used to be. No matter how hard we try, there's a distance growing between us, and I don't know how we can get back to where we were." Lila sighed, feeling both anxious and relieved. "I want us to fight, James. But I also feel that if we continue like this, we'll just keep drifting apart. We've been fighting for something that we can't achieve together." James lowered his gaze, as if deep in thought. "I think you're right. We've tried, but maybe we've been too caught up in something we can't fix. I want you to know that I love you, Lila, but I also think we need to stop. Maybe we need to give ourselves space to grow, to find happiness on our own." Lila felt her eyes begin to well up with tears. She tried to hold them back, but her heart was too heavy to suppress the emotion. "I love you, James. But I feel like we're starting to lose ourselves. We're too focused on what we think should be, but we've forgotten about what we feel." James reached for Lila's hand, holding it gently. "I love you too, Lila. But we can't keep living in this uncertainty. I think we need to give ourselves space to find our own happiness." Lila looked at him with eyes full of sadness. Although her heart wanted to keep fighting, she knew that this decision was the best for both of them. They couldn't keep holding on just because of the love they had for each other. Love was important, but it wasn't enough to keep them together if the relationship was no longer healthy. "I understand, James," she said, her voice almost inaudible. "I don't want us to keep feeling like this. Maybe it's time for us to separate, to give ourselves room." James nodded, his face full of regret. "I'll always cherish us, Lila. You'll always be an important part of my life." A few days later, after that conversation, Lila and James decided to give themselves some time to rest and reflect. They agreed not to rush the final decision, but they knew change had to come soon. Although they still cared for each other, Lila felt that their relationship had reached a point where it couldn't be repaired. They both needed time to focus on themselves, to find happiness without one another. Lila spent a few days outside the city again, walking along the riverside, enjoying her time alone. She felt freer, even though there was still a deep sense of loss. In every corner of Berlin she passed, she was reminded of James, of all the beautiful memories they had created together. But she also knew that this was a step she had to take, to let go of something that no longer brought peace. That night, Lila returned to Lake Toba to seek peace once more. This time, she came alone, without James by her side. She sat by the lakeshore, feeling the cool evening breeze touch her face. Lila closed her eyes, trying to push away the doubts that still haunted her heart. She knew that this was a new beginning for her, a journey she had to face alone. "Sometimes, we have to let go of what we love to make room for ourselves," she whispered to herself. With a lighter heart, Lila felt that, although she had lost something that meant so much, she had also found herself again. She was no longer trapped in confusion, no longer afraid to move forward, even without James. She knew that even though their relationship had ended, she still had the chance to find true happiness, with or without a partner. Lila sat at the edge of Lake Toba, watching the calm waters reflect the light of the moon. The surroundings were quiet, with only the soft whisper of the wind and the occasional distant call of a night bird. Here, far from the bustling life of Berlin and all the complexities she had left behind, Lila felt a peace that was hard to find anywhere else. Each gust of wind reminded her that while life sometimes leads us to parting, there is always room to find new peace and happiness. After her last conversation with James, Lila felt a deep sense of loss, but also a burden that began to feel lighter. Letting go was never easy, but there was an understanding growing within her, that sometimes, releasing is a necessary step for both sides to grow better, even if it meant walking separately. After days of walking alone, visiting places that gave her peace, Lila felt she had found the part of herself that had been lost. She began to realize that true happiness didn't come from possessing or holding onto a relationship, but from accepting herself, from appreciating each moment that happened, and from giving herself space to grow. Life in Berlin felt different now. Though she felt the loss of something significant, Lila knew that life had to go on. She began to discover new interests and activities that brought her joy. She decided to focus on self-development, taking writing classes, trying her hand at painting, and diving into the world of art she had long neglected due to her focus on a relationship full of challenges. Every day, she felt stronger, more independent, and more confident in who she was. A few months later, Lila had finally found a new path in her life, and she felt more alive than she had in a long time. Although she still felt lonely some nights, she realized that solitude was not something to fear. She had learned to enjoy her time alone, getting to know the feelings she had previously ignored. In Berlin, Lila began working on art projects and writing that she had postponed for so long. Each small step she took felt like a big achievement. She started writing a blog about her experiences with open relationships, about the healing process after a breakup, and how to find true freedom within oneself. Her writings received positive feedback, and this brought her an immense sense of satisfaction. One morning, while sitting in a cozy little cafe in Berlin, Lila met someone unexpected. His name was Alex, a young artist who worked in illustration. They started talking about art, freedom, and how to see the world from a different perspective. Their conversation flowed easily, and Lila felt a warmth that reminded her of the conversation she had with James, but this time, she felt it in a different way, more relaxed, more comfortable. "It was nice meeting you, Lila," Alex said after their long conversation. "Maybe we could collaborate someday." Lila smiled. "I'd love that, Alex." Although she knew she was still in the process of healing, Lila felt that life was giving her a new opportunity to grow, and she no longer felt afraid to face the future. The relationship she had with James, although it had ended, had brought her to a place where she could better understand herself. Now she knew that true happiness came from within, and that she could love again one day, not because of the need for someone else, but because of the love she had already found within herself. That night in Berlin. A few months after her breakup with James, Lila stood on the balcony of her apartment in Berlin, gazing at the star-filled sky. She felt at peace. Beneath the vast night sky, she realized that although beautiful relationships may end, life continues, offering a chance to find love in a different form. Love for oneself, love for life, and love for the people who enter our lives in unique ways. Lila took a deep breath. "I'm ready for the next journey," she said to herself, her voice full of confidence. "I'm ready to live without fear." With a smile on her face, Lila looked ahead at her open future, realizing that though the separation had been painful, it was a part of the journey she had to take. She had learned that sometimes, freedom comes from letting go, and when one door closes, another opens, offering new opportunities for love and happiness. After an inevitable separation, Lila embarked on a new journey, one filled with lessons and growth. Although the sense of loss remained, she discovered an inner strength that allowed her to move forward. Leaving behind the boundless freedom she had once fought so hard for, Lila now realized that true happiness does not come from relationships alone, but from self-acceptance and the space to grow without fear. In her solitude, she rediscovered her love for art, writing, and the simplicity of life. Though her separation from James had changed many things, Lila learned that sometimes, in order to find happiness, one must have the courage to let go and give oneself the chance to love in a deeper, more meaningful way. With a lighter heart and newfound hope, Lila stepped into a future brimming with new opportunities, realizing that love is not about possession, but about being true to oneself and embracing whatever comes with an open heart.